It all starts in the mind. Before anything ever happens physically, before emotions begin to take root and spill over, everything begins in the mind. The mind is the first battlefield where love, affection, and even conflict are formed. When a man loses his mental connection with someone, it's often the first sign that things are slipping away. This mental disconnect is not just about thoughts, but about the entire mental framework. The way he perceives you, the bond you shared, and his place in your life. You might think that a breakup or a period of distance only affects emotions, but it's the mental shift that sets the stage for everything else. When he first felt the change, it didn't just register as something emotional. It was like a subtle shift in his thoughts. Maybe he didn't realize it at the time, but slowly he started thinking less about you, or perhaps the way he thought about you changed. At the beginning, he may not have understood why the connection wasn't as strong, but what happened in his mind was the real turning point. The absence of your thoughts, the lack of your energy in his daily musings, made him start to question things. The thoughts of, I don't need this, or I can manage without this relationship crept in, but slowly they became hollow. They were empty thoughts because deep down he could feel that mental connection with you slipping away, and with it, a sense of loss began to take root. When we're mentally attached to someone, they become a part of how we see our world. Your thoughts are like mirrors, reflecting back pieces of each other's lives, creating a mental space that becomes a shared reality. When that mirror cracks, or when one side of the connection breaks down, it creates a gap, and that gap grows bigger as time passes. This is why the mind plays such a critical role in relationships. His sense of stability, of who he is in this relationship, was built on the foundation of shared thoughts and experiences. And when those thoughts start to disappear, so does the connection. It's not immediate, but over time, he began to notice that something was missing, not physically, but mentally. It might seem like something small at first, a fleeting thought, a random moment when he would think of you, and then just as quickly, that thought would fade. But that's how it starts. At first, it's easy to dismiss, easy to brush off. But slowly, those thoughts became more and more infrequent until one day he realized he wasn't thinking about you as much anymore. You weren't occupying that mental space in his mind like you used to. And that's when he started to feel that shift. Here's where it gets deeper. The mind doesn't just let go of people like that. When you've shared a life, when you shared space in each other's minds, the mind doesn't forget. The mental disconnect creates a kind of void, a silent space where you used to be, and in that silence, his mind starts to work overtime, replaying memories, analyzing past conversations, and dissecting the moments that led to the breakdown. What seemed like an insignificant mental shift becomes a persistent thought, almost like a haunting. It's important to understand that the mind doesn't just forget. It holds on to the idea of what once was, and when the connection starts to fade, the mind struggles. It struggles because the mind wants to preserve what it once had. It doesn't want to let go of a bond that felt real, that felt deep. The mind holds on to what it knows, and when that bond is broken, it doesn't know how to process that loss fully. It holds on to the remnants of that bond, even when the rest of him tries to move on. This is why, after some time, you might hear him reach out, trying to revive something that is long gone. It's not necessarily the physical connection he's yearning for at first, it's the mental one. He wants to reconnect, not just to you as a person, but to the thoughts, the moments, and the shared mental space that once existed between you two. It's the mental gap, the realization that he no longer has access to that part of his life, that drives him to try to reestablish contact. In the end, the mental shift is often the hardest part of a breakup to overcome. It's the foundation of everything. Without the mental connection, the emotional one fades and the physical one follows. But when that connection was once so deep, when it shaped how he thought about his future, it's not something easily replaced. And that's why, when it's too late, he realizes that he can't just replace you. It wasn't just about the love, it was about the thoughts, the bond, and the mental framework you two created together. And now, in his mind, there's a space where you used to be, and he can't ignore it any longer. He lost in his mind first, and that's why, deep down, he wants you back. But by the time he realizes this, it's already too late. When a man starts to question his feelings or the relationship, it's not just because of one thing that happened in a single moment. It's a gradual process, a series of small realizations that build up over time. It begins with a subtle shift in his perspective. What once felt familiar, comfortable, and secure starts to feel uncertain. And this uncertainty doesn't come from external factors at first. It begins in his mind, his thoughts about you, about what he thought the future would look like, and about how the dynamic between the two of you had been changing. At first, these doubts might be fleeting, small, passing thoughts that he brushes off or ignores. But the more he allows these thoughts to linger, the more they begin to shape his perception of the relationship. The subtle distance that starts to grow between the two of you, the small moments that slip by unnoticed, all start to add up. And in his mind, things begin to shift from "we're fine" to "maybe this isn't working anymore." But what he doesn't realize in that moment is that this shift isn't just in his thinking, it's in his emotional attachment to the relationship as well. As time passes, the mental disconnect deepens. He might try to rationalize it, tell himself it's just a phase or that he's overthinking, but deep inside he knows something has changed. His mind starts to play tricks on him. It's easy for him to dismiss his feelings as insignificant. After all, this is a relationship that had been solid, a bond that had seemed unbreakable. Yet the more he tries to ignore the nagging feeling of doubt, the more it festers. It eats away at his sense of security and causes him to feel disconnected, not just from you, but from himself as well. What happens next is something many don't see coming. When the mental shift grows large enough, the space between the two of you expands and the emotional detachment follows. The initial questions, doubts, and uncertainties that were once just thoughts in his mind start to seep into his heart. The emotional disconnection begins to affect his behavior. He becomes distant. He withdraws. He's no longer the man who used to put in the effort, who made time for you, who made you feel special. And in his mind, he believes that this is just how things are now, that it's natural for things to cool down, for the passion to fade, for the relationship to settle into a comfortable but distant pattern. But here's the key. As much as he wants to believe that this change is normal, deep inside, he knows it's not. The problem is, he doesn't know how to stop it. He's no longer mentally invested the way he used to be. The effort he once put into keeping the relationship alive starts to fade because in his mind, the bond is no longer strong enough to keep him engaged. And at this point, it's not just about the physical space between the two of you, it's the mental distance. The absence of the shared thoughts and feelings that once connected you both on a deeper level. In that mental space, he begins to second guess himself. He starts to wonder if he made the right choice, if things could have been different if he had acted sooner. He begins to miss the connection he once had with you, not just in a physical way, but mentally and emotionally. But here's the thing. When the mind disconnects, when the mental bond weakens, it's not as simple as just flipping a switch to get it back. The damage that has been done in his mind takes time to heal, and sometimes it's already too late by the time he realizes the importance of that connection. This realization, when it hits, is powerful. He starts to understand that he can't replace you. He can't just move on and find someone else who fits into the space you once occupied in his mind. It's not because someone else isn't out there, but because mentally, no one else will ever match the connection you had. The thoughts, the memories, the experiences you shared, they're unique. And no matter how hard he tries, he can't replicate them with someone new. At this moment, the realization hits him hard. He's lost the mental connection, and with it, a part of himself. He can't just walk away and find that bond with someone else. The effort to reconnect is real, but it's complicated by the fact that the space he's now in, emotionally and mentally, is already filled with regrets, doubts, and missed opportunities. The more he tries to push past this, the more he finds himself stuck in a place of longing for something that's slipping further and further away. In the end, it's the mental realization that he's lost something that cannot be easily replaced that makes him want to return. He wants to go back to what he once had, but now, in this moment, it's too late. The mental distance is too great, and he can't undo what's been done. This is the tragic part of the journey. He's finally aware of what he's lost, but by the time he wants to reclaim it, you've already moved on. At first, he thought walking away would be easy. He convinced himself that life would go on, that he could replace what he had with you, that someone else could step in and fill the space you once occupied. And for a while, he even believed it. He distracted himself, kept himself busy, surrounded himself with people, maybe even entertained the idea of someone new. But what he didn't realize, what he couldn't see at the time, was that he was running from a loss he hadn't yet processed. See, when a man lets go of something real, the absence doesn't hit him right away. The mind tricks him into believing he's fine, that he made the right choice, that there's nothing to grieve. But slowly, reality starts to sink in. The little things, the way you used to check in on him, the way you understood him without him having to explain, the comfort of knowing someone truly saw him for who he was, those things don't just disappear. And when he tries to find them in someone else, he's met with disappointment, because what he had with you wasn't just about moments. It was about a deep, irreplaceable connection. He starts to notice the emptiness. The laughter doesn't feel the same. The conversations don't hit the same depth. The presence of another person doesn't bring the same peace. And that's when it begins, the slow realization that he lost something rare, something meaningful, something he won't get back just by moving forward. He tries to shake the feeling, but it lingers, creeping up in quiet moments, in unexpected places. And the most painful part, by the time he fully understands what he lost, you've already adjusted to life without him. You've grown, you've healed, you found peace in the space he left behind. While he was running from the truth, you were facing it. And that's why now, when he finally sees the depth of what he let go of, it's too late. At first, he didn't want to admit it, not to himself, not to anyone. He told himself he was fine, that he was moving on, that life without you would be just as good, if not better. But see, that's the thing about denial. It works for a while until reality forces its way in. He distracted himself, kept himself busy, maybe even entertained the idea of replacing what he lost. But the truth never really left him. It sat there in the back of his mind, waiting for the moment when the noise would quiet down and he'd have to face it. Because deep down, he started to feel it before he ever admitted it. The moment he saw something that reminded him of you and felt that ache, the moment he caught himself wanting to tell you something, only to remember you weren't there. The moment he realized that no one else understood him the way you did, that's when the cracks started forming in the illusion he built for himself. And the more he tried to run from it, the more it followed him. The hardest part about losing someone isn't the initial shock. It's the slow, creeping realization that your life is quieter without them, that something is missing in the way you move through your days. And for him, that realization hit hardest in the moments he least expected. And it wasn't just about missing your presence, it was about missing what you brought into his life, the way you made him feel, the sense of security, the understanding, the connection that couldn't be replicated with anyone else. He thought time would erase the impact you had on him, but instead, time only made it clearer. He lost more than just a person. He lost a part of himself, the part that was better when he was with you. And by the time he was ready to admit it, by the time he was willing to face the truth, you had already stepped into a new version of yourself, a version that no longer waited for him to catch up. He thought he had all the time in the world. He believed that you would always be there, always be an option, always be waiting in the background of his life. See, when someone gets comfortable with your presence, they start to take it for granted. They assume that no matter what, you'll still be within reach, that they can come back when they're ready. But life doesn't work like that. People don't wait forever. At first, he didn't notice the shift. He was too caught up in his own world, too busy with distractions, too confident that you weren't going anywhere. But the moment he realized he couldn't just walk back into your life like before, that's when it hit him. That's when the panic set in. Because losing you wasn't just about losing a person, it was about losing the version of himself that existed when he was with you. And now he sees the difference. Now he sees that the door he thought was always open has closed. He sees that while he was busy playing games, you were busy growing, healing, moving forward. And that realization, that's what keeps him up at night. Because for the first time, he understands that some things, once lost, can never truly be regained. He convinced himself that he was better off without you. He told himself that he needed space, freedom, or maybe even something new. And for a while, he believed it. He walked away thinking that life would be just fine without you, that you were replaceable, that someone else could easily fill the space you once occupied. But that's the thing about walking away from something real. You don't realize what you had until it's gone. At first, he was distracted. Maybe he filled his time with other people, with temporary thrills, with anything that kept his mind from wandering back to you. He ignored the quiet moments, pushed away the memories, convinced himself that this was the right decision, but deep down, the truth was forming, even if he wasn't ready to admit it yet. Because real connections don't just disappear. You don't forget the way someone made you feel. You don't erase the laughter, the comfort, the understanding that felt effortless. And the more time passed, the more he started to see it. He started to feel the absence, the emptiness where you used to be. He looked around and realized that no one else quite compared. And then it hit him. It wasn't just you that was missing. It was a part of himself that he had only ever found when he was with you. The version of himself that was stronger, more inspired, more at peace. And that's when he realized the weight of his decision. That's when he understood that in leaving, he hadn't just lost you, he had lost the best parts of himself. He's starting to feel the weight of his own decisions, the realization that in walking away from you, he lost something irreplaceable. But what's more, it's not just about the absence of you, it's about the absence of a future that could have been built together. When he walked away, he thought he was moving towards something better, something different, something more exciting. But now, as he looks around at the life he's built without you, he sees only fleeting distractions, temporary fixes, and a sense of emptiness. He didn't expect to miss the quiet moments, the conversations that went long into the night, the understanding that existed between you without words needing to be spoken. He didn't realize how much of his growth, his motivation, came from the support you gave him. He didn't see how your presence in his life made him better, made him feel like he was capable of more, of being more. But now time has passed, and with it the truth has begun to settle in. He can't deny it anymore. The more he tries to fill the space, the more he feels the void where you once were. The more he sees the way others move on with their lives, the more he realizes just how unique what you had truly was. There's no easy way to replace that connection. No one else who can offer the same understanding, the same depth, the same passion. This realization has started to tear him down, slowly but surely. It's a quiet kind of pain, the kind that creeps in when he's alone, when he's left with his thoughts and the memories of what once was. It's the sting of regret, the kind that comes when you realize that you let something good slip away, that you took for granted the love and trust that you were given. He's starting to see in painful clarity that no matter what he does now, the fact remains that he cannot replace you. He can't undo the mistakes, the words that were said, the distance that was created. And the more he tries to move forward, the more he finds himself looking back, wishing he could go back to those moments, those chances, and change the course of what happened. But it's too late. You've already moved forward. You've already learned the lessons that he's only just beginning to understand. You've already grown, evolved, and found a sense of peace within yourself that he didn't appreciate until it was too late. The realization that he can't replace you is sinking in now, and it's a hard pill to swallow. But even as he grapples with this new awareness, there's something important he's learning. He's learning that some things once lost can never be regained. The opportunity he had to cherish you, to nurture what you both had, is gone. He can only learn from the pain of that loss and hope that moving forward he can apply the lessons of regret to the future he's trying to build without you. And maybe that's the hardest part for him to accept, that you were the best thing that ever happened to him, and now he must live with the consequences of not realizing it sooner. And while he may want you back, the truth is that what he's lost can never be fully reclaimed. When he looks back at everything, at all that was lost, it's not just the absence of your presence that hits him. It's the way you made him feel, the way you made him see life. Before you, there was a sense of wandering. He wasn't grounded. He wasn't sure of what he wanted or who he was. But you helped him see himself more clearly. You showed him what it means to truly be loved and supported. You brought out the best in him. And now, with you gone, he's beginning to feel the weight of his own emptiness. It's not just about missing your laughter, your touch, the way you would reassure him when he felt doubtful. It's about the realization that the kind of love and connection you offered is not something he can just go out and find again. You weren't just a partner, you were a mirror. You reflected his strengths, his flaws, his dreams, and his potential. In your presence, he saw what he could become, what he could achieve. You made him believe in himself in a way no one else ever did. Now, as time passes and he finds himself caught up in the noise of his life, he's beginning to realize just how much he took for granted. The small moments, the quiet mornings together, the inside jokes, the sense of calm he felt when you were near, those are the things that he can never replace. He knows that no matter how much he tries, no one else will ever make him feel the way you did. You gave him a sense of purpose, of clarity. You made him feel seen in ways he never thought possible. But it's not just the absence of your love that hurts him, it's the way he's lost his sense of direction without you. The foundation that you both built together was solid. It was something he never truly appreciated until now. It wasn't just about love. It was about the way you inspired him to be better, to think bigger, to push past his own limitations. You helped him set goals, reach for things that once felt impossible. Without you, he feels like he's lost the guide that was leading him. It's not that he hasn't tried to move forward. It's that every step he takes without you feels directionless. He's walking through life, but the road ahead no longer feels clear. He can't help but wonder, how did he get here? How did he let the one person who saw him for who he truly was slip away? He knows he's made mistakes, and there's a part of him that deeply regrets the things he didn't say, the things he didn't do. He regrets not recognizing the value of your presence sooner, of not nurturing what you both shared. But regret doesn't change the past. And now, as he's left to pick up the pieces of his life, he sees the truth in its harshest form. He can never get back what he lost. Not because he didn't try, but because some things, once broken, can't be fixed in the same way. But here's where the pain is also teaching him a valuable lesson. He's starting to see with painful clarity that he must learn to rebuild from this loss. It's not about getting back what was, but about understanding what needs to change moving forward. The regret he feels now isn't just about longing for what he had. It's about recognizing what he must learn in order to be better, not just for himself, but for anyone who may enter his life in the future. At some point, he's going to have to accept that you are not the person he can keep turning to for support, for love, for guidance. It's too late for that. But in this realization, there's an opportunity for growth. He has to figure out who he is without you, who he can be on his own. And while that's a painful process, it's also a necessary one. The journey ahead is not going to be easy. It's going to be filled with moments of doubt and moments of longing. But the one thing he now understands is that this loss, this pain, is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new chapter. And maybe, just maybe, if he's brave enough to face the consequences of his actions, to learn from his mistakes, he can become the person he should have been all along. But that can only happen when he truly understands the value of what he lost. This realization is painful, yes, but it's also necessary, because in acknowledging the depth of his loss, he's beginning to understand that some things, some people are irreplaceable. And now he's faced with the challenge of rebuilding, not just his life, but his sense of self. And that journey begins by accepting the truth that he can never go back, but he can learn to move forward, with or without you. When he begins to understand that it's too late, a deep sense of loss and regret will start to settle in. This isn't just about missing you in the superficial sense. This is about a much deeper realization. It's about the fact that he didn't realize the depth of your connection when it mattered most. The realization that the things you gave him, your attention, your care, your love, were irreplaceable. In the beginning, he may have thought he could easily move on. He may have convinced himself that he could find someone else to fill the gap, to fill the space that you once occupied. But the truth he faces now is that no one will ever be able to replace you. He might have fooled himself into thinking that what you two had was temporary, that it wasn't something special enough to last. But now, as time passes and he experiences the void left by your absence, he sees just how wrong he was. The problem with waiting too long to realize the value of what you had is that by the time he truly sees it, the opportunity to act on it has often passed. He might not be able to undo the damage, to fix the broken pieces, because he took everything for granted when he had it. And this is what happens when we don't cherish what we have until it's gone. We think we can always come back to it, but life doesn't work that way. He will think about the little things, the things that at the time seemed insignificant, the way you smiled when he walked into a room, the way you would quietly listen when he needed to vent, The way your presence alone could calm the chaos around him. These things weren't just moments. They were the foundation of the connection you two shared. It wasn't just about love. It was about partnership, about understanding, about the way you were able to communicate without even saying a word. He never truly appreciated the quiet power of that bond until now. What he's realizing now is that he cannot replace the emotional depth you brought to his life, the conversations you had, the way you both would sit together and dream about the future, how you encouraged him when he was lost, how you believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. All of that is irreplaceable. And this is the truth that stings the most. The knowledge that even though he might try, no one else will ever be able to give him what you gave. When he was with you, he had everything he needed, but somewhere along the way, he failed to recognize that. It's not just about missing the affection, the intimacy, or the company. It's about missing the partnership, the shared dreams, the connection that went beyond the surface. He took that for granted, thinking that it would always be there, always be available to him. But now, as he faces the reality that you're gone, the weight of his mistake feels unbearable. And it's not just the loss of you as a person. It's the realization that the space you occupied in his life was filled with things that no one else can provide. The lessons, the growth, the inspiration. You were a constant source of motivation. He didn't realize how much you shaped his thoughts, his behavior, the way he saw the world. He didn't realize that you were helping him become a better version of himself. Now, without you, he feels the vacuum in his life. He might try to fill that space with distractions, new relationships, new hobbies, new experiences. But the truth is, nothing will fill the void you left behind. It's like trying to replace something irreplaceable. He might find temporary comfort in the presence of others, but he will always be haunted by the memory of what he lost. He may even try to reach out, hoping to rekindle what you once had, to revive the connection. But by this point, it might be too late. The truth is, sometimes we only realize the value of something when it's no longer within our grasp. And while he may regret his actions and wish for a second chance, the truth is that life doesn't always offer us those second chances. Sometimes the best we can do is learn from our mistakes and use the lessons to move forward. As much as he might want to turn back time to fix what he broke, the reality is that he can't. The damage has been done, and the space between you two is only growing wider. And in that space, he will feel the painful reality of his own mistakes, the mistakes that led to the distance, the mistakes that caused you to walk away. But here's the key lesson he needs to understand. The hurt, the regret, the longing, it's all part of the process of growth. It's part of the journey toward self-awareness, toward realizing the things he's taken for granted and the things he needs to change in himself. This is the moment where he has to face his own flaws and take responsibility for the choices he made. And while it may hurt, this is where true transformation begins. In the end, the lesson is clear. When you don't value what you have, when you take someone for granted, you risk losing them forever. And once that loss is felt, it can never truly be undone. All that's left is the memory of what was, the regret of not seeing it for what it was when you had it. But it's never too late to start changing, to begin growing, and to understand the real value of the things that matter most. By the time he realizes what he had, the damage has already been done, and often it's far too late. Regret becomes the dominant emotion as he sits with the truth that he couldn't recognize your worth until it was too late to do anything about it. It's an unfortunate part of the human condition, the inability to see something truly valuable while it's right in front of us, until it's no longer available to us. It's not that he didn't care, or that he didn't have feelings for you. It's that he took you for granted. At some point, he assumed that no matter what happened, you would always be there. He might have thought, I can always come back to her, or she'll always wait for me, without realizing that relationships are not about possession. They're about appreciation. The truth is, love, commitment, and respect aren't guarantees. They need to be nurtured. And by not nurturing that relationship, he allowed it to slip through his fingers without even realizing what he was losing. Now, he's left holding the pieces of what could have been, wishing that he had treated you with the value you deserved when he had the chance. And here lies the painful irony. He now knows, more than ever, that no one else will ever be able to give him what you did. No one else will provide the same connection, the same trust, or the same depth of understanding. And this realization is like a cold slap to the face. It forces him to face the mistakes he made, the things he failed to see in the moment. When he looked back, it's clear that there were so many signs, so many moments where he could have shown you how much you meant to him, but instead, he ignored them, brushed them aside, and took you for granted. He was too focused on his own world, too absorbed in his own life to recognize that you were the one who was holding everything together. You were the person who brought balance to his chaos, who understood him when no one else could, who stood by him through the good and bad. But now that you're gone, he is left with the realization that the person he took for granted was the one person he truly needed. As he sits with the pain of losing you, he is forced to acknowledge the weight of his actions. He thought that he could go on without you, that he could find something or someone else to fill the void. But now he understands that nothing and no one will ever compare. The memories of you begin to haunt him, the way you laughed, the way you listened, the way you always seemed to know what he needed before he said a word. The spaces you occupied in his life are now painfully empty, and he can't seem to shake the feeling that he lost something irreplaceable. But there's also a painful truth he must face. It's too late for apologies. It's too late for second chances, because by now, you have moved on. You've learned to live without him, to create a life for yourself that doesn't involve him. Your strength has grown, your independence has flourished. And while he may want to turn back time and make things right, he now understands that you've already done the work to heal and rebuild. You no longer depend on him for your happiness or for your sense of worth. You have found that within yourself. It's the ultimate wake-up call for him. You don't need him. Not in the way he thought you did. You can stand on your own, you can thrive without him, and you will continue to move forward with or without him in your life. This realization is where the regret becomes bittersweet. Because while he understands his mistake, he also understands that he can't undo it. It's a painful truth to swallow, knowing that no matter how much he wishes he could go back, time doesn't allow for that. The truth is that sometimes the most valuable lesson we learn comes from the pain of losing something we didn't recognize as valuable until it was gone. For him, this will be one of the most important lessons he will ever learn. It's a lesson about not taking people for granted, about not waiting until it's too late to show someone how much they matter. It's about appreciating what we have while we have it and understanding that love and relationships are fragile. They require care, attention, and constant nurturing. What he'll eventually come to understand is that the true value of what he had with you wasn't just in the love you shared, but in the way you encouraged him to be a better person. You were a catalyst for his growth, for his self-discovery. And now that you're gone, he has to find that within himself. But the hardest part for him will be reconciling with the fact that, in the end, it was his actions that led to your departure. And that's a truth he has to live with. As he tries to move forward, he will learn to appreciate relationships differently. He will learn to never take love for granted again. But even in this growth, he will always carry the weight of what he lost. The love, the connection, the chance to truly build something lasting. And that is a burden he will carry for a long time.